Red Bull's RB22 upgrade may have just leaked, and Mercedes could be facing the one thing no championship team wants to hear before the fight truly begins: FIA scrutiny. Because this is not just about a new part, or a faster car, or another paddock rumor. This could be the moment where one team discovers a hidden advantage, while another is forced to prove that its entire direction can survive the rule makers. And here is the dangerous part. If Red Bull has understood something Mercedes has not, then the gap may not appear all at once. It may start quietly. One corner. One tire stint. One setup choice. One uncomfortable question after practice. Then suddenly, the entire season feels different. Mercedes is under pressure. Red Bull may already be preparing its next weapon. And the detail that matters most is not the one everyone is talking about. It is the one being held back. Subscribe to the channel. To understand why this Red Bull leak feels so threatening, you have to look past the word upgrade. Because in Formula 1, that word gets used so often that it almost loses meaning. A new floor. A different wing. A revised side pod. A tiny shape near the edge of the car that most fans would never notice unless someone circled it in a photo. But the teams notice. They always notice. And when Red Bull changes something, the entire paddock starts looking closer, because Red Bull has built a reputation for finding performance in places that do not look dramatic at first. That is what makes this RB22 story so dangerous. The biggest upgrades are not always the ones that look the biggest. Sometimes, the most important change is the one that makes the car easier to drive when the tires are fading, or more stable when the wind hits from the side, or more predictable when the driver turns in at high speed and needs the rear of the car to follow without hesitation. That sounds simple. But it is everything. Because a Formula 1 driver is not just asking for speed. Every driver on the grid wants speed. What they really want is trust. Trust that when they brake late, the car will not punish them. Trust that when they attack a corner, the rear will not suddenly step away. Trust that when the race gets messy, the car still gives them something they can lean on. And this is where Red Bull has so often been frightening. Not because its cars are always comfortable. They are not. But because when Red Bull gets a concept right, it can create a car that feels alive in the hands of the right driver. Sharp. Aggressive. Direct. A car that rewards commitment and punishes doubt. That is exactly the kind of machine rivals fear. Because you can fight a car that is fast on one lap. You can strategize against a car that only works in clean air. You can survive against a car that struggles on certain circuits. But a car that gives the driver confidence everywhere, that is different. That becomes a season-long problem. And this is why the RB22 leak is not just a technical rumor. It is a warning sign. If Red Bull is already preparing a major direction for this car, then it may not be trying to fix one weakness. It may be trying to build a wider operating window. In simple terms, that means a car that works in more situations. Hot track, cold track, heavy fuel, low fuel, fresh tires, old tires, fast corners, slow corners. Think of it like a pair of shoes. Some shoes feel amazing on a smooth floor, but terrible on wet pavement. Some feel quick when you first put them on, but uncomfortable after a long walk. The best ones are not just fast for one step. They keep working when the surface changes. That is what every Formula 1 team wants from a car. Not just peak speed. Useful speed. Speed that survives pressure. And if Red Bull's upgrade is aimed at that, then the leak becomes much more serious than a normal development headline. Because useful speed changes everything around it. It changes how early a driver can attack in qualifying. It changes how gentle the car can be on tires in the race. It changes whether a team can choose an aggressive strategy, or whether it has to protect itself from problems before they happen. And most importantly, it changes the way rivals feel. Because when a rival sees Red Bull bring an upgrade that makes the car more complete, the fear is not just, they are faster. The fear is, we may be chasing the wrong thing. That is one of the most uncomfortable feelings in Formula 1. A team can spend months building toward an idea, defending it in meetings, testing it in the simulator, shaping the car around it, convincing the driver that this is the path forward. Then another team arrives with a different answer. And suddenly, the room changes. The same numbers that looked promising yesterday start to feel less convincing. The same weaknesses that seemed manageable begin to look dangerous. The same questions that were brushed aside now return with more weight. This is how pressure begins before the racing even starts. And Red Bull understands that better than almost anyone. Red Bull does not need every detail of the RB22 to be public for the message to land. It only needs rivals to believe there is something meaningful coming. Because belief creates tension. Tension creates mistakes. And mistakes create openings. That is the first layer of this story. Red Bull may not just be upgrading a car. Red Bull may be applying pressure to the entire grid. But the second layer is even more important, because this is where Mercedes enters the picture. Mercedes is not just another rival watching from the side. Mercedes is the team facing the other half of the headline. FIA attention. And when a team is facing FIA attention at the same time a rival is being linked with a major upgrade, the pressure becomes heavier. Because now Mercedes is dealing with two fights at once. The fight to be fast. And the fight to make sure the way it becomes fast can survive scrutiny. That is a brutal combination. One team appears to be moving forward. The other may have to look over its shoulder. And in Formula 1, looking over your shoulder is dangerous, because the sport moves too quickly. A team that hesitates for even a short period can lose development time, confidence, and momentum. That does not mean Mercedes is finished. That would be far too simple. Mercedes has the people, the history, and the resources to respond. It has survived pressure before. It has rebuilt before. It has taken criticism, absorbed setbacks, and come back stronger than many expected. But this situation is different because timing matters. If the FIA clampdown forces Mercedes to rethink even a small part of its approach, while Red Bull is already preparing the next phase of its car, then the gap may not come from one dramatic moment. It may come from accumulation. A tenth here. A tire advantage there. A cleaner balance on one circuit. A better setup range on another. One weekend where Red Bull finds performance quickly, while Mercedes needs extra practice time just to understand the car. That is how a championship can start slipping. Not with a disaster. With tiny moments that do not look decisive until later. And that is why this first block matters. Because the story is not really about a leak. It is about direction. Red Bull's direction may be expanding. Mercedes' direction may be under examination. And when one team is expanding while another is being questioned, the emotional balance of the fight changes. The paddock feels it. The drivers feel it. The engineers feel it. Even the fans feel it, before they can fully explain why. Something starts to feel uneven. And that is where this story becomes more than Red Bull versus Mercedes. It becomes a test of who has understood the future first. Because Formula 1 does not reward the team that simply reacts to today. It rewards the team that prepares for what everyone else will only understand tomorrow. And if the RB22 upgrade is the first clue that Red Bull is already thinking one step ahead, then the real danger for Mercedes is not just the FIA clampdown. The real danger is that Red Bull may have chosen the fight before Mercedes even knew what fight it was entering. But now the story moves into a darker place, because the Red Bull upgrade is only half of the pressure. The other half is Mercedes. And for Mercedes, the word clampdown is dangerous because it carries a message that every Formula 1 team understands immediately. The FIA is watching. That does not automatically mean Mercedes has broken a rule. It does not mean punishment is guaranteed. It does not mean the car is illegal. But it does mean something in the competitive picture has become sensitive enough to attract attention. And in Formula 1, attention can be almost as powerful as a penalty. Because when the FIA focuses on one area, teams begin to behave differently. They become more careful with their language. More careful with their development choices. More careful with what they bring to the track, and when they bring it. That caution has a cost. A team might still have speed. It might still have smart engineers. It might still believe in its concept. But suddenly, every decision has a second question attached to it. Will this make the car faster? And will this survive the FIA? That is a brutal way to develop a Formula 1 car. Because the fastest teams are usually not the ones that think slowly. They are the ones that move with conviction. They test an idea, trust the data, give the driver a direction, and keep pushing before rivals can respond. Mercedes knows that better than anyone. This is a team built on precision, discipline, and relentless improvement. But even a team like Mercedes can be hurt by uncertainty, because uncertainty attacks the invisible parts of performance. It attacks confidence. It attacks timing. It attacks the belief that everyone is pulling in one clean direction. And that is where the clampdown becomes more than a rule story. It becomes a human story. Imagine being a Mercedes engineer who has spent months building toward one idea. Long hours. Endless simulations. Tiny changes that most people will never notice. Every surface shaped with a purpose. Every trade-off argued over in meetings. Then, just as the battle with Red Bull begins to sharpen, the FIA starts closing in on the area your concept may depend on. Even if your work is legal, the feeling changes. You are no longer just trying to make the car quicker. You are trying to make it quicker inside a shrinking space. And that is where mistakes can creep in. Not because people are careless. Because pressure compresses everything. It compresses time. It compresses options. It compresses the courage to take risks. And Formula 1 punishes fear faster than almost any sport on Earth. Here is the part that makes this so important. A clampdown does not need to destroy a car to damage a season. It only needs to remove freedom. Freedom to run the car exactly where it works best. Freedom to design around a clever interpretation. Freedom to keep developing without wondering whether the next clarification will force another adjustment. That loss of freedom can be worth more than people realize. Because a Formula One car is not one big idea. It is thousands of tiny decisions connected together. Move one part, and another part reacts. Change one airflow path, and a different area stops working the same way. Raise the car slightly, and the tires may behave differently. Change stiffness, and the driver may lose confidence over curbs. Adjust one legal interpretation, and suddenly the setup window becomes narrower. It is like pulling one thread from a jacket. At first, nothing dramatic happens. Then you notice the shape is not quite right anymore. Then another seam starts to strain. Then the whole thing feels weaker than it looked. That is why Mercedes cannot treat FIA pressure as background noise. Because if the clampdown touches an area connected to the car's core performance, then Mercedes may have to spend valuable development time protecting what it already has instead of chasing what comes next. And that is exactly where Red Bull wants its rivals. Defending. Explaining. Rechecking. Hesitating. Meanwhile, Red Bull's rumored RB22 upgrade creates the opposite feeling. Attack. Expansion. Confidence. A sense that the team is preparing something designed not just to pass a test, but to shape the fight. This contrast is what gives the story its power. One side is linked with forward movement. The other is linked with restriction. And even if the truth is more complicated, Formula One is a sport where perception matters because perception becomes pressure. A driver feels it when reporters ask the same question over and over. An engineer feels it when rival teams start watching one area of the car more closely. A team principal feels it when every sentence about legality becomes a headline. And rivals feel it too. They smell weakness. Not always real weakness. Sometimes just potential weakness. But in Formula One, potential weakness is enough to start a hunt. Mercedes has lived on the other side of that hunt before. It knows what it feels like to be the team everyone studies, copies, questions, and tries to pull back. But this time, the emotional weight is different. Because Red Bull is not just chasing Mercedes. Red Bull may be forcing Mercedes to defend against two enemies at once. The stopwatch. And the rulebook. The stopwatch is simple. Brutal, but simple. You are faster or slower. The rulebook is different. The rulebook creates gray areas. Arguments. Interpretations. Clarifications. Technical directives. Quiet fear. Public confidence. Private anxiety. And when the stopwatch and the rulebook start working together, a team can lose more than lap time. It can lose certainty. That is the hidden danger for Mercedes. Not that it suddenly forgets how to build a fast car. Not that one FIA clampdown instantly destroys everything. The danger is that the team has to split its attention at the exact moment Red Bull may be narrowing its focus. And focus is a weapon. A team with focus develops faster, debates less, chooses direction sooner, gives drivers clearer answers, turns practice sessions into progress instead of diagnosis. A team without full focus can still look strong from the outside. But inside, it may be using its energy differently. Solving yesterday's threat while tomorrow's threat is already arriving. That is where the RB22 leak becomes even more uncomfortable for Mercedes. Because if Red Bull is signaling a car designed around adaptability, stability, and a wider operating window, then Mercedes cannot simply respond with a single flashy upgrade. It needs a concept that survives. A car that does not only produce speed in perfect conditions. A car that remains predictable when the track changes, when tires age, when wind direction shifts, when qualifying pressure rises, and when the FIA's eyes are fixed on every clever detail. That is the real standard. And it is merciless. Because the best Formula One cars do not only win when everything goes right. They keep winning when the weekend tries to break them. And if Mercedes is forced to trim back, rethink, or protect any sensitive area, Red Bull may gain something that is not visible on a timing screen at first. Development comfort. That means Red Bull can spend more time asking, how do we go faster? While Mercedes may have to ask, how do we go faster without creating another problem? Those are not the same question. One is aggressive. The other is defensive. And over a season, that difference can become enormous. This is why the leak and the clampdown cannot be separated. The Red Bull story creates fear because it suggests a team with a plan. The Mercedes story creates tension because it suggests a team under examination. And when a planned attack meets a restricted defense, the whole competitive balance can tilt before the first major battle is fully visible. But there is still one dangerous complication. Mercedes is not weak under pressure. That is what makes this fight so fascinating. A weaker team might collapse under FIA attention. A less experienced team might panic, overcorrect, or waste time trying to prove a point.